Just a little bit of time here as far as an intro goes in case we have some people come in a little bit late. My name is Jimmy Hallyburton. I'm the executive director of the Boise Bicycle Project. I'm the founder there as well. We've been around for about 11 years, since 2007. Today, during this talk, I'm going to talk a little bit about community bike co-ops or projects, or basically just a different version of a nonprofit bicycle shop. How the Boise Bicycle Project has been successful here in Boise, how different versions of the Boise Bicycle Project could work in communities all across Idaho and all across the country for that matter, and actually go into some ideas as far as what it would take to get some of those things started and the impact they would have. This is sort of an optional two-part session. So after this session, we're actually going to be hopping on some bikes. And if you don't have one here, Green Bike, Boise Green Bike has brought about 10 of those over for us. And if you would like, we're going to cruise over to the shop. It's a little less than a mile away. Very controlled bike routes the entire way there. So if you're nervous about the ride, should be a really pretty easy ride. And then we're actually going to do a tour of the shop, and that may be helpful for some of the things that I'm talking about that you're having a hard time painting the picture with. But I should have some good photos on here as well. So again, I'll tell you a little bit about the bike project, a little bit about our history, and then talk about what we could do to start some of our similar things in some other towns and the impact that those should have. How's the conference going so far? Good? Has anybody had anything just completely blow their mind yet? Mind-blowing moment?
I was very impressed with the gravel road.
Nice.
I was impressed with the new sort of federal highway ideas to apply in rural communities. That's just like painting and signage.
Sure. Yeah, some stuff that's really pretty simple, right? Yeah, easy victories. Did anybody go to the canal one earlier today? I missed that one, but I was really interested. Man, that sure seems like a great opportunity. Yeah. Well, cool. I'm glad you're getting a lot out of the summit already. I know they still have some more fun stuff planned. And if you aren't making it with us on the ride to the Boise Bicycle Project later, the party over at George's should be a lot of fun. And just keep those fingers crossed that it's not raining. If not, party inside Boise Brewing. Is that the backup plan?
Party, a keg of Boise brewed beer inside George's.
Inside George's. Okay, so yeah, so dance party in George's if the weather gets too bad.
Jimmy, did you find out if people need bikes? Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So there should be plenty of those Boise Green bikes out there. Yeah, good deal. And we should we wait until the actual cutoff time in case there's somebody going over there later, or should we just leave with this group when we're done here?
We can just leave with this group when you're ready to go.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm dragging you along with me. It's going to be fun. All right, well, with that, let's go ahead and get started here. Again, my name is Jimmy Hallyburton. I'm the founder and executive director of the Boise Bicycle Project. I want to tell you just a little bit about myself, and then I have some questions for you. So this is me. I grew up in Boise, Idaho, next to a dairy farm and a chicken farm, so my neighborhood smelled really, really good. And my sister right there as well. And you can see the dirt driveway leading from our yard out onto the street. And I tell this story pretty often, but I distinctively remember at about 4 years old leaving that driveway on my little bicycle for the first time and turning onto the open road and really feeling like my entire world had expanded. And that's usually that moment that people talk about where all of a sudden they have this freedom to go out and connect with the community and connect with their neighborhood, and their bicycle starts giving them that sort of independence. So from a very early age, I experienced the freedom that a bicycle could create, and it really sent me on this pedal-powered journey that's brought me to where I am today, still riding a bicycle around just about everywhere that I go. So this is what I'm talking about as far as that freedom and that world expanding look. When I look at this girl's eyes, her name's Fahara. She's from Sudan. And I can see that freedom in her eyes. And I recognize that look because I've felt that look and I've had it myself. And luckily I get to work with an organization like the Boise Bicycle Project where we get to see that look every single day. So I am a little curious about your journey. And so I already had some folks raise their hands earlier. But if you are from out of town, out of Boise, all right, and where are you from?
Pullman, Washington.
Pullman, Washington, okay.
Originally from Minnesota, but live in Moscow.
Moscow, okay.
Moscow.
Moscow, all right. And then Emmett. And was there anybody else from out of town? Everyone else is here in Boise? All right, okay, so raise your hands if you own a bicycle today. Everybody. All right, keep your hands raised if you had a bicycle as a kid. Everybody still? Okay, keep your hands raised if you can remember your first bicycle. Still have it?
74 Stinger.
All right, and keep your hands raised if you remember the color. All right. So we have these memories of riding a bicycle around as a child, and I sometimes get the opportunity to speak in these different groups, and I kind of gave it away already, but I'll ask people, like, what was that experience like? What is the word that describes the feeling your bicycle gave you as a kid? And of course the answer is freedom. Everywhere you go, doesn't matter what state you're in, doesn't matter what age of people that you're talking to, they will use that word freedom over and over again. For people who have ridden a bicycle their entire life, they've sort of kept that freedom and they've always felt it. For a lot of others, they felt that freedom and then something weird happened at about 16 years old. And that feeling of freedom started to disappear a little bit. And then at some point they got back on their bicycle, because at some point they got back on that bicycle and they found that childhood experience again. They found that feeling of freedom, and it's got them riding on their bicycles still today. So I want to talk a little bit about the Boise Bicycle Project and what we do. So we're a nonprofit bicycle shop, and our volunteers and our staff take bicycles from the community. Folks like you donate them. We fix those bicycles up, and then we distribute those back to the community in need. That's what we do, and we're really good at it. We, in the last 10 years, have distributed over 13,000 bicycles back onto the streets of Boise. A little over 5,500 of those have gone to children in our community that we've donated to. And for some of these kids, this is the first bicycle that they've ever had, their first introduction to that feeling of freedom and independence and connection to the community. That's what we do. Why we do it is because we've felt that feeling of freedom. We know how it's impacted us. We know how it's created opportunities for us to engage in our community, and we want to pass that on to other people. The bicycle is great. What the bicycle can connect people to, those opportunities in the community, that is why we do it. So a little bit about BBP's history. It was started by two people, myself and the other co-founder, Brian Anderson. We were on a hotshot firefighter crew, and we both grew up in Boise working in bicycle shops. We both grew up with similar stories of leaving that driveway for the first time. And working in these bicycle shops, we saw that there was a large portion of the community who didn't have access to the services that we could provide. So they would come into the bicycle shop and they needed to purchase a bicycle and they couldn't afford it. So their other options were either getting something used or getting something at a department store. And oftentimes the people who couldn't afford the bicycles that we were selling were actually the people who needed these bicycles the most. These were the people where this bicycle actually was going to be their form of transportation and a key that was going to connect them to opportunities in the community. So one, we saw that that was a barrier, that the community did not have access to bicycles, and that there were kids in our community who didn't have that same feeling of freedom that we had growing up because they didn't have that bicycle sitting under the Christmas tree or for their birthday or for these other experiences like we've had. The other thing that we noticed is that there were a lot of people who were coming into our bicycle shops who needed their bicycles repaired. And sometimes the cost of repairing that bicycle was more than it was actually worth. And more often than that, it was cost prohibitive for them to actually do it. So they couldn't afford that bicycle tune that we were going to do. And sometimes that bicycle tune took an hour of work, a ton of labor to get going. And sometimes we would take that bicycle behind the counter. We would turn a screwdriver a couple of times, and we would charge somebody $60 to get their bicycle tuned up when it was just a tiny little adjustment. So what we really wanted to do is we wanted to create a bicycle shop where anybody, regardless of income, had access to bicycles, bicycle repair, and bicycle education. And the way that we wanted to do that was, instead of fixing bicycles for people, we would teach people how to fix their own bicycles. So the tools would be in their hands, and we would simply be there to guide them through the process. So this is the very first bicycle that we donated. This lives on my desk, so that's a little magnet there on the magnet board behind me. I look at this picture every single day. I knew that we needed to start the Boise Bicycle Project for the reasons that I talked about already. When we gave this bicycle away for the very first time, or very first kid that we donated a bicycle to, I immediately saw that look in her eyes. And up until that point, I hadn't thought about my driveway story in a really long time. Now I tell it more often. At that point, it was just a memory that I didn't even associate with the Boise Bicycle Project. But that look in her eyes, all of a sudden that feeling came back to me. That world-expanding feeling of freedom, and I saw it in her eyes. And that's really when we knew that, like, this is something that we not only want to do, this is something that we have to do. So when you donate a bicycle to a kid, it becomes somewhat addicting. It's sort of a gateway drug to get more involved and donate more bicycles to kids. And as we started donating to more bicycles to kids in our neighborhoods, people quickly wanted to help out. They had a bicycle that they wanted to donate. They wanted to help us work on a bicycle. Maybe they knew how to do it. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they just knew a kid in the community who needed a bicycle. And I think in Brian and I's heads, we knew that there were a lot of kids who didn't have access to bicycles. We had no idea how large that population was. We had no idea how many kids didn't have that same experience of freedom that we had growing up. And it seemed like people started coming out of the woodwork. And so when we very first started out, we went and we picked up that trailer full of bicycles at the youth ranch. It cost us $5 that they charged us for, and we stored them in Brian's backyard under tarps, and we would go and drink beer on the weekends and fix up bicycles in his garage, and then we would find kids in our own neighborhoods who needed bicycles. Soon we outgrew that space, and so we moved into a small studio apartment. It was about 400 square feet. And it was going to be renovated, and so they let us basically squat in there for about $80 a month. And then we began having other volunteers come in and help us work on these bicycles. The picture you see of the kid on the bicycle is our very first Christmas Kids Bike giveaway in 2007. And since we didn't have a facility, we did that out in the park. It was about 17 degrees outside, and we're lucky that it wasn't colder. Most of those bicycles went to kids in our refugee population. And up until that point, I had no idea how large Boise's refugee resettlement population was, or how beautiful these people were that we were working with. People from all over the world that my only access to beforehand had either been what I had seen on the news or somebody walking down the street in clothes that didn't look very familiar to me. And as soon as we started working with them and getting to work with them firsthand, we started to realize that these people come from some places and have experienced some really, really terrible things. There's a lot of things that are different, but there are some things that we all have in common, and we started really to understand and enjoy working with the population so much more. Soon we outgrew that space, and so we moved into the old Boise Rescue Mission. Anybody remember that? 6th and Front Street? And so we taped that sign onto the outside, and we don't have this picture, but we used to have another sign that said "Jesus Saves Gas" on the bottom of it, and that was our location for a while. So there was a building owner in Boise, Clay Carley, who let us squat in that building. It was supposed to be torn down, and they were going to build some high-rise condominiums. 2007 hit, and that plan wasn't happening anymore. We went into a big recession, and so we got to stay in this building for a while. So this building is a condemned homeless shelter. It's a place where it wasn't fit for people to live in, but it was fit enough for us to actually have a temporary bicycle space where we could have volunteers coming into our shop, helping us work on bikes, and then distributing those back to the community. We were not allowed to have the public come into our space. It was condemned. We couldn't get a certificate of occupancy. The only really way you could be there was to be a volunteer. And so we simply had 2 volunteer nights a week. We had Wednesdays from 6 to 8 and Saturdays from 12 to 4. You could come down and volunteer and work on bicycles that we would later distribute to the community. Now, we needed some source of income, and so some of the bicycles that we were getting donated at the time, we would actually fix up and we would sell. Since we couldn't sell those at our shop, we would sell those at the Saturday market, and there was actually a couple of restaurants in town, Bitter Creek Ale House being one of them, that would sell them in their rafters. And so once a week, we would show up with 3 bikes, we'd put them in their rafters, they would sell them, they would cut us a check, we would use those funds to buy more tools, to buy computers so people could log in their volunteer hours, just some really basic things to get us going. And we had that space that turned into a pretty cool area in no time. You can see the fish in the back. This is another one of our Christmas Kids Bike giveaways. We had graffiti all over the wall. So as far as a homeless shelter goes, a condemned, abandoned homeless shelter, it actually kind of seemed like a weird Scooby-Doo episode where like people are walking around the abandoned amusement park and there's ghosts walking around in the corner. The place was definitely haunted, but we had it transformed into a place that was actually creating a lot of impact in the community. And one of the things that we learned pretty quick is that no matter if you like people on bikes or adults on bikes or not, everybody wants a kid to have a bicycle. Everyone wants a kid to be able to ride their bicycle to school or to ride around their neighborhood. That was universal. It didn't matter who we talked to, no matter what side of the political line they fell on, no matter how car-centric their community was. Everybody wants a kid to have a bicycle, period. And so we really rallied the community behind that about making sure that these kids in our community had access to these bicycles. So the other thing that we did is we had a lot of fun. And I feel like bicycle organizations sometimes miss out on this part. And I'm going to give you a very extreme example here. So what you see right here is Tour de Fat. You see thousands of people riding down the streets on bicycles. We used to have an event called Bear As You Dare. And Bear As You Dare is a lot like it sounds. You pretty much wore as many clothes or as few clothes as you wanted on this ride. And we would ride from Camel's Back Park and we would ride to the Capitol Building. And so it seems like sort of an exhibitionist type of ride, but there was really a message behind it. And it was that if you can see us with our clothes off, then you should be able to see us with our clothes on. And when you're riding a bicycle around without very many clothes on, everybody is looking and everybody sees you. We were able to have these sort of fun, quirky events, and we could do that because the next day we were showing up at the shop and we were donating 20 bicycles to kids. So we had established that credibility in the community by making actual physical, tangible impact that allowed us to do some other things that reminded us, even as adults, that riding a bicycle can be fun and that we can have fun while having a purpose at the same time. So we were always up to something, getting creative and being a little bit silly, and then directing that back towards the impact that we were creating. In 2010, we moved into our current location on Lusk Street. That's where we're going to be going a little bit later today. This was a huge step for us because at this point we actually had a permanent location and we had a location that the public could actually come into. And this is where the bicycle co-op side of things really began to take form. So the day that we opened that building, and still today, anybody from the community can come into our shop space and they can work on their bicycle. They can pay $10 an hour, they can pay $60 for an entire year of shop time, or they can do what we call work trade, where they work for us for $10 an hour and then they can use that money towards credit to fixing up their own bicycle. So this goes back to our mission of making sure that bicycles, bicycle repair, and bicycle education was available to the entire community. Now, the great thing about this model is that it's very inclusive. It means that anybody can come in here and use this space, no matter what their income level is. And when they come in, whether they're a $60 a year member or a work trade, everybody's going to be treated the same. And we're going to share this space and we're going to learn from each other so that we're not only learning how to fix our bikes, but we're learning about the person who's sharing a stand next to us at the same time. There may be a chance that somebody is working on a $4,000 triathlon bike next to somebody who's experiencing homelessness and needs to get their bicycle fixed so they can go look for work in the community. And at that time, they're at the same level and they're learning how to fix their bicycles together and they're learning a little bit about each other in the meantime. This also made it possible for us to sell used bicycles and parts, which is about 65% of the funding for our program. So 65% of our funding comes from used bicycle and part sales. So anybody off the street can come into our shop, and if they got their saddle stolen, if it ripped, they can buy a used saddle from us for somewhere between $3 and $20 rather than go to a bike shop where the only option is a new one that they may not be able to afford. They can also come into our shop and they can get a bicycle for anywhere from $60 to about $200. And this is bringing in income to our organization, but it's also serving our mission of making sure that everybody has access to bicycles regardless of income. So maybe you can't afford to buy a bicycle at a shop and you can only afford to buy one at a department store. This gives you the option of buying that shop quality, completely overhauled, refurbished bicycle at the same price as that department store, if not a little bit cheaper. So it's bridging the gap. Now, when we started this place, we realized that this was new and different, and there may be some bicycle organizations and bicycle shops that maybe had some issues or didn't necessarily understand what we were doing, and that was certainly the case. We had some people who really didn't like us at the very beginning because they saw us as competition. You could go to any single bicycle shop now in Boise, and we are all on the same page. And what has happened is that instead of pulling away from them, is we've created a bigger pie. We've gotten more people on bicycles and made this a bigger bicycle community. And somebody may come in and they may buy that $200 mountain bike from us when they first want to get into it. But then when it comes time to buy that $1,000 bicycle, they're going to George's. They're not going to BBP. And after a couple years of people really seeing that we were doing something different, and a lot of times reaching out to a different demographic and really bringing in more people to the bicycle culture, all of a sudden those relationships with those bicycle shops changed. Now most of those bicycle shops are dropping off a bunch of used parts to us about once a week, parts that they're taking off the bicycles that they're working on, and we're working together to get more people in the community on bicycles. So once we moved into the shop, it really allowed us to start expanding our programs. And we have this program called YPOP, and that's our Youth Path of Opportunity program. And that basically, to us, means that any kid between 2 and 18 years old can get a bicycle and bicycle repair for free. So a little bit about how that looks. Every one of you, or most of you, probably have something that looks like this. These are what we call dream bike drawings. So we are really good at fixing up bicycles. We're really good about teaching bicycle safety. We have no way of identifying the kids in the community who need bicycles the most. And so what we do is we partner with other nonprofit organizations, schools, counselors, social workers, people who are actually working with kids. And we use them to help identify the kids who really need these bicycles, the kids who these bicycles are really going to create huge opportunities for, that are allow them to do after school programs that they wouldn't be able to otherwise, summer camps, getting access to community centers, saving them an hour trip to the grocery store. These kids who really have no other transportation options, kids who have parents who are sometimes working multiple jobs. So we use these other nonprofits to identify these kids, and then they have to fill out an application. Everybody fills out an application, gets approved. And if they're 12 years old and younger, they give us their name, their height, their 2 favorite colors, and then they draw a picture of their dream bike. And then we use these pictures to pick out the bicycles that have been donated by the community, and we build these bicycles in to look as close to what you see on your picture as possible. Now, the best part about this is that when we give these bicycles to kids, they always say, "This is exactly like the picture that we drew." And if you look at your pictures there, it's pretty hard to draw a bicycle regardless. I challenge you to draw better than that's on here. They never look exactly like the picture, but to the kids in their minds, this is exactly like the picture that they drew every single time. So between 2 and 11 years old, kids can get bicycles from us for free. We have them go through an hour-long bicycle safety class. On their bicycle, they get a brand new helmet, a light, and a lock to go with it as well. And that lock is just as important as any other part of that bike, because if they take that home and they can't lock it up, that bicycle is not going to be there for very long. The first question people usually ask us with our kids' bikes is, do the kids get a helmet? Yes, the kids get a helmet. They always get a brand new helmet. We don't donate any used helmets. They never ask if the kids get a safety class. And so I always like to tell people that helmets are great. Helmets only help you after something bad happens. Our goal is to make sure that these kids know how to ride and ride safely before something bad happens, to reduce that chance of them getting hit in the first place. And then we make sure that we have a helmet to go with that as well. So every single kid gets a helmet and a safety class who gets one of our bicycles. After 11 years old, from 12 to 18, our kids go through an Earn a Bike program. So if they want a bicycle, they actually have to come into the shop. We pay them $20 an hour in BBP credit, and they get to pick out their bicycle on the very first day. It's broken. And then after they've earned enough money, they get to fix up that bicycle, and they leave with a bicycle that they picked out, that they customized, and that they've actually invested their own time and sort of their own money into. So they have a bicycle, and they have the ownership and the education that's built into it as well. The other things that we have to realize is that every single kid who gets a bicycle from us, especially in the month of September, probably has a flat tire within the first week of us giving them a bike. And there's an issue when you say, hey, you have transportation problems, come down to the Boise Bicycle Project and we'll fix your transportation problems. So we do have free bicycle repair opportunities for the kids who get our bikes at the shop all the time. But what we've done is that we've located the different areas around town where the majority of our kids live. We've got about 6 different hot spots where most of our kids get bicycles. And we go to those locations. We go every single week, we go to one of those different locations. So about 3 times a year, we're visiting different neighborhoods around town, and we're doing mobile bike repair. And in mobile bike repair, we fix the kit, or we show up with the tools and the supplies. The kids are the ones turning the wrenches, and we're there to guide them through the process. And this is what happens every single time we show up. We try to partner with these other nonprofits, these community centers, to get the words out. We send this information home with their parents. We always expect a ton of kids to be there. We show up, there's no kids there. Maybe there's 1 or 2. And then the first kid gets their bicycle fixed. They disappear, and then they come back 5 minutes later, and they've got 2 other kids with them. And then the next kid gets their bicycle fixed. They disappear, they come back with 3 more kids, and the next thing that you know, you've got 30 kids who are lining up waiting to get their bicycles repaired. And so no matter how hard we try to spread the word, the kids are the ones who spread the word best. And it shows us how important that bicycle is, and how when we give them a bicycle and we're able to keep that bicycle fixed up, how they're immediately able to connect with the rest of their community, and how when they're able to connect with the rest of their community, how that creates opportunities for them, and it creates opportunities for their friends and their families and for the other kids that live there as well. We use the tangible stuff that we do, like donating bicycles to kids, mobile bike repair, these things that are very visible. A bicycle gets donated to the Boise Bicycle Project. It's broken. Then a volunteer turns a wrench and it's fixed up again. And then we give it to a smiling kid with that look in their eyes. And then they go and they connect with the community. We use that tangible, visible experience to create other opportunities in the community. So one of the things that we do is we invite political leaders down to our shop when we're donating these bicycles to kids. Oftentimes we invite political leaders to things that kind of suck and that aren't very fun, or opportunities where people get to yell at them. We don't oftentimes invite them to the things where they get to be a hero for a little bit and they get to be part of the fun things that you do. So when we invite these politicians down to BBP and they help give these bicycles away to these kids, we're able to go back to them later and say, hey, do you remember that family that you donated a bicycle to? Well, the change that you're talking about, the streets that you're talking about improving or not improving, actually runs right by their house. And you're able to create that connection for them with the actual community that they're talking about. This is where I think bike co-ops really come into play, and they don't think they get enough credit. We always talk about these advocacy organizations that are doing all of these great things. 90% of their work is done behind the scenes, and it's really difficult for the community to understand that and to see things moving at what seems like a really slow pace, when if you're in those organizations, you know that that's just the pace that things go. So if we can combine that work that we're doing behind the scenes, these really big issues, these big changes, with that tangible stuff that people can identify with, it really has the opportunity to create some major change. I've got 2 great examples. One is the one that you see on the screen. That's Butch Otter. Again, he looks a little skinnier in this picture. It's not a slam on Butch. He's already a pretty skinny guy, and he probably can hear me upstairs. So this is when Butch Otter made it so that bicycle and pedestrian questions were mandatory on every single driver's ed exam. And so one of our kids, Max, who's running around somewhere in that picture, but Max's parents are there, Max was hit by a car. hit by a lady driving a car, drugged for about 40 feet. He's alive today, and it's a miracle that he's with us. He's got burns all over his body. He spent about 4 months in the Salt Lake City Children's Hospital. And while he was gone, we made a promise to Max and his family that by the time that he was riding a bicycle again, that we would have made permanent changes to make our streets safer for families. And while he was in the hospital, we had the opportunity to go into the governor's office and we said, hey, here are 3 different things that you could do that would have a permanent impact on making our streets safer for Idaho families. And we always frame it that way, kids and families, kids and families. This is the thing that everybody can identify with. By the time that Max was riding a bicycle again, the governor's office had worked with the Idaho Transportation Department, and they had made these questions mandatory on the statewide driver's ed exam. Now, what that means is that every single kid who's going through the driver's ed program now has to learn the answers to those questions. There's about 12 different questions that can be on there, and it's a section in the driver's ed manual that they used to be able to skip over because the questions actually used to be optional. You could skip over the bicycle and pedestrian questions there, and now because it's mandatory, the driver's ed instructors know that one of those questions are going to be on there, and so they have to cover that section of the book. I use that as an example of how we can do this sort of grassroots change, create this grassroots support in the community to actually work and make some pretty large-scale permanent changes as well. My other example is a little more anecdotal, but during one of our Christmas Kids Bike giveaways 3 years ago, we invited a lot of local politicians to the giveaway, and we had one of them who signed up, and I'm not going to mention his or her name, and we had one of them sign up, and they were signed up for a 1-hour shift. And they got there at the very beginning of the day. They ended up staying for all 8 hours, giving bicycles to all these different kids. And this was one of our politicians who usually fell on the far other side of the spectrum as far as being bicycle friendly. And before he or she left, they told me, you know, today is the first day that I met a refugee family, and today I met hundreds of them, and I didn't see one terrorist in the bunch. That's what they told me at this bicycle giveaway, and I thought, oh my God, that's the worst thing I've ever heard. But at the same time, that's exactly the message that we're trying to get across, that these are people, these are families, and when people get to be part of that process, when we invite them to interact with other people, then we really can create this great change in the community. Our most recent program that we started is called Shifting Gears. Shifting Gears is a partnership with the Idaho Department of Corrections. We actually deliver about 15 bicycles a week to the women's facility in South Boise at the women's prison. And we teach them how to fix kids' bikes. So we go out there, we drop the bikes off, we begin to teach them these skills. Once they've fixed 15 bicycles of their own, that earns them a voucher for a bicycle the day that they're released. So when they get out of prison, they can come down to the Boise Bicycle Project. They've already earned their bicycle, and we have one waiting for them that will now allow them to connect to different opportunities in the community, to get to their probation meetings, their parole meetings, to look for work, to do all these different things in the community that they sometimes have a hard time getting to. At the same time, we're teaching them skills to work on their own bikes. Almost all the gals that we work with have kids, so they're learning how to work on kids' bikes as well. One of the things that we didn't necessarily know was how big of an impact it would have on them to actually still be part of their community while they were incarcerated. So you can see the picture at the bottom with the big group, the one guy in the green hat on the top. And that's Lucky. He's one of our best mechanics and one of our instructors out there. That's them at our Christmas Kids Bike giveaway, where the Department of Corrections actually let them come down and help them give bicycles away to the kids for that giveaway. A lot of them saw kids riding away on the bicycles that they worked on. So we've got this program with the South Boise Prison Facility. We've got the program with the East Reentry Facility, where the women actually come down to our shop and they work on bikes there. And we're just launching one with the men's facility as well. The men are there a little bit longer, and so there will be a little more vocational training in this program as well. Not only has this allowed us to work with another group who's experiencing transportation barriers, it's doubled the amount of bicycles we've been able to give to the community by just simply training more people on how to work on them. And it saved us a massive amount of space in our shop because we always have 15 bicycles bicycles somewhere else that are getting fixed up, they come back to us ready to go, and we can immediately donate those to kids or donate those to other organizations who can donate those to kids in their own community. So I want to talk a little bit about our path ahead, what's next for the Boise Bicycle Project. I've talked to you a little bit about our programs, what we do down there. Our next steps are we do a great job at giving bicycles away to kids. Like I said, we're donating almost 1,000 bicycles a year, about 5,500 since we first started 10 years ago. We make sure every single bicycle comes with a light, a lock, a helmet, and a safety class. The next step is really, now that we've got these kids out there, we need to make sure that they have safe places to ride. And so we're working really hard right now at using these tangible stories and this impact to go back and make sure that the neighborhoods where these kids live, they can actually ride around safely. And we know that the kids are out there because we have the numbers to show these different organizations that we work with. We also know that the next step in us doing that is not doing it alone in Boise. We need other organizations all around the state of Idaho and beyond to be starting similar projects to the Boise Bicycle Project. And so we're really spending the next few years helping different organizations get started that aren't BBP. So I have no desire to ever expand Boise Bicycle Project in Nampa. What I would like to do is I would like Nampa to start the Nampa Bike Project, and we'll give them all the bikes, all the tools, all of our resources that helped us get going for them to create their own bike project. Because these co-ops, they exist all over the country now. And every single city that they're in, they're slightly different, because each community that they're in have different needs, and there's no way that I can be aware of what those needs are in Nampa, in Twin Falls, in Moscow. But there are things that do relate. There are things that we can share. And if we can give these other communities these tools to get started, then they can address their own needs in the community. And that's what we're here to kind of move on to now, is why your community needs its own bike project. And I think we've talked about that. We've talked a little bit about the impact that you can create when you combine the tangible with the stuff that you're doing beyond the scenes. I think sometimes we forget that in order for somebody to use a bike lane, they need a bicycle in the first place. I think we oftentimes forget that people need bikes. It's the first step to getting people out there. And the communities all around Idaho, they already have the bikes there. Most of them are broken down. Most of them just need to be repaired. And if somebody could help teach them to fix those bikes and learn from them at the same time, then everybody grows. Everybody does better. And the next kid in the community gets the bike handed down. And these same bikes don't have to be thrown away. New bikes don't have to be purchased. And we can actually get people out there riding around on bicycles. It's one of those things where there's that saying of if you give somebody a fish, they can eat one meal. If you teach a person to fish, they can eat for a lifetime. Well, they still have to have that fishing pole to begin with, right? So in order for us to really grow these bicycle communities, to have these bicycle lanes, to talk with our political officials and convince them that we need this type of infrastructure, we have to make sure that there's people out there who actually have the first initial tool, the bicycle, that tool for connecting in the community first. Second one, again, is combining that tangible impact so that we can create opportunities with us. In this picture right here, we've got folks from the Ada County Highway Department, we've got the fire chief, we've got the police chief, we've got city council members. The mayor showed up later that day. We have people from the Idaho Transportation Department. We are inviting local officials down to be part of the fun stuff. When they come down here, nobody's yelling at them and saying, you did this wrong, you did that wrong, you did that wrong. Everyone's saying, oh, I'm so glad that you're coming down here and helping give these bicycles away to these kids today. And I think that if we're not starting our own bike projects in our different communities, we need to find other people who can do that tangible stuff that everybody can identify with, so we can get them on board with that stuff that we're doing behind the scenes. And then the last part is safety in numbers. Safety in numbers is a real thing. When I ride my bicycle to work and somebody sees me, somebody driving a car sees me riding our bicycle, that makes them more aware to be looking out for cyclists everywhere else in the city. And I think that that's pretty awesome, because that means that every single time I ride my bicycle, I'm making it safer for the kids that we're donating bicycles to. And every single one of those kids that we're donating bicycles, when they're riding their bicycle to school, they're making it safer when we ride as well. So as we get more bicycles out to the community, it creates that safety in numbers. It creates that snowball effect where people begin looking when it becomes more normal and when they see those things. one thing I think to remember is that any size fits. So a lot of times people see the Boise Bicycle Project and they say, that could never work in my community. That could never work in McCall or Cascade. We don't have enough bicycles. We don't have enough people who are interested in this. The reason I went through our history is that there are bicycle co-ops all around the country who've gone through our same history, or they've stopped at a certain point because that was the point where their community needed them to be. And so right now we're working with one in McCall, the Payette River Bicycle Movement. And basically what they do is they still have the very initial thing we did. They've got 2 volunteer nights a week. They donate bicycles 2 times a year. That's it. That's all that they do, and that's enough for that particular community. And they don't have any plans to have a paid executive director. They don't have any plans to have a huge building or a place where people can come every single day. What they have fits the needs of their community. Boise has a large refugee resettlement population, so we work really closely with that refugee resettlement population. That's not the same in other parts of Idaho or other parts in the country. The Boise Bicycle Project isn't in the middle of an actual neighborhood. There's bicycle co-ops in other parts of the country that are surrounded by kids and families, and they directly serve the kids and the families that are sitting right there next to them. So I really want to make it clear that the Boise Bicycle Project is a really good example of a large-scale bicycle cooperative, but it doesn't have to be that big, and it can still create just as much impact. Every community is different, and you have to figure out what the needs are of your own particular community, and then you start building something around there. And it can be something as simple as having some space in your garage, holding a volunteer night once a week, once a month, giving bicycles away when people need them, and seeing how the organization grows from there. The last thing I want to do before I open it up for questions and before we go for a ride is I'm really big on stories. And so the things that I handed out today, you can see it says draw a picture or write a story about your dream bike, excuse me. And one of my absolute favorite pictures and stories that we got is Andrew McCormick. And you can see his picture right there. But it also came with a story. I'm going to read a story. I would like to have a bike to ride. I do not have one to ride. My cousin has a bike to ride and can go everywhere, but I cannot go with him because I do not have one. My Nana is raising me and doing all she can, but she do not have money for a bike. I have coins I have saved and will give them to help. All of my friends have bikes, and I cannot go and feel sad. I would be so happy to have a bike. I do not care about color. I would be thankful just to have one. That is all I want for Christmas. Andrew McCormick. So you can see Andrew McCormick right there with his dream bike. I get so excited when I see this picture. I get so excited when I hear these stories because this is a bicycle, but what excites me is where the places this bicycle is going to take this kid. The places that they're going to be able to connect to in the community, the opportunities that they're going to have. And I get excited about it because I've experienced it. Like I've gone on the same journey that Andrew is embarking on right now. And I think that we as a bike community always have to remember that people need to start that journey. And if we don't give them the keys to start that journey, that tool of connection to the community, it becomes pretty hard no matter how hard we try to connect them to other ways there as well. So that's Andrew McCormick. And if you look back at that picture, okay, look at the bike. Look at that. It's exactly like the picture that I drew, and that's exactly what he said. And he's one of 5,500 different stories that we've had at the Boise Bicycle Project. So that's my email address. We have information up here. We're going to go for a ride here in a little bit. I am curious if people have any questions about the Boise Bicycle Project, about something starting in their own community, about barriers that maybe you have that you think might be preventing yourself from doing something like this, or anything along those lines. So do we have any questions? Yeah.
The lights, the locks for helmets, you obviously have to have a lot of those on hand. Do companies work with you on like donating them, or some of your parts sales goes to?
A little bit of both. So it costs us about $50 per bicycle to donate to a kid, and that includes the refurbishing of the bicycle, any supplies that it needs, the light, the lock, and the helmet. The light and the lock right now, when we sell a bicycle, we have funds that help provide the light and the lock. We haven't been able to figure out a way to get those sponsored just yet. We do have wholesale accounts, so we can purchase those for pretty cheap, like $3.50 for a lock, for a decent one. The helmets, we actually partner with Primary Health. And Primary Health provides us 1,000 helmets a year. They get to put a sticker on the back. We made sure the sticker was reflective. And we donate these helmets with each of the bicycles. They're kind of the cool skateboarding style helmets, kind of like the one that she's wearing there. That's a great partnership because it really serves them as well. And it's a really easy sponsorship to get because when you're donating bicycles to kids, you have a beautiful, adorable picture of every single kid wearing the helmet that they helped provide. And you can show that helmet on their head and how that organization is trying to make it safer for these kids to ride bicycles. So if we didn't have that partnership with Primary Health, we could talk to St. Luke's, we could talk to St. Al's, we could talk to any insurance company that has any sort of a priority of making it kids safer and healthier. And that's a pretty easy sponsorship to get. And then we purchase those through a company called Helmets Are Us, which is an organization that gets helmets for cheap to schools and nonprofits, about $5 or so per helmet. We make sure that every single kid gets a helmet when they get one of our bicycles during our monthly bike giveaways. We gave away 40 bikes just last week, and every kid got a helmet. Also, any kid who has their bike already, they can go through our safety class for free. We don't charge them anything. And if they don't have a helmet, by going through the safety class, they get that helmet first. And so we factor that into the helmets that we request from Primary Health. Mm-hmm.
Just to tag on to that, I work for the Department of Health and Welfare. And a colleague of mine is the manager for the maternal and child health program. And one of the, major topic areas of her program, obviously, is children's health. So she's been working with another colleague of mine that works with physical activity nutrition on how they can support improving childcare policies and environments. And so she's always looking for ways and projects to spend money. So I would be happy to connect if that's a need of me or anything else, that she's always looking for ways that she can support her mission in keeping children healthy and safe.
Absolutely.
But also how to do that in the local community.
And the helmets, the lights, and the locks are really important because the bicycles, there's plenty of them in your community, guaranteed. No matter where you go, everyone's got 2 kids' bikes sitting around in their garage that they were going to save for their grandchildren, but now they can give them to you. The lights, the locks, and the helmets, those almost always have to be new. You just can't rely on those to come in enough. They're really easy to brand, and they're easy to find folks who are concerned about safety and health for children. And even a lock is going to make it so a kid can ride a bicycle more, and that's going to increase their health. And so those, I think, are some of our easier ones to fund, especially the helmets. Yeah.
Well, I was curious about the light part. Like, that seems kind of, for a kid, like something that not really taken care of. It would be maintenance with batteries and stuff. Why the importance of that? Other than,
Sure. Well, a lot of our kids are riding bicycles to and from school, and they're doing after-school programs or going to the community center. So if the community center gets out at 5 o'clock or 5:30 in the evening during the winter time, it's going to be dark when they're riding home. And so, legally, they've got to have them, but we want to make sure that these kids are seen. So legally in Idaho, you have to have the front light, white light, rear reflector. We encourage the red light as well. When we pick out those bicycle lights, we only do ones that have regular either AAA or AA batteries, because the watch battery ones, those are too hard for families to get. Chances are they have some of the other ones laying around. We also order those in our shop, and most bicycle accounts, wholesale accounts, you can actually order batteries from as well. And so we make sure that the families know that when those lights go dead, they can come back and get those lights. But they really are important. In Boise, there's a Kurt Holster bike lot. Anyone go to his talk? Maybe it's tomorrow. He provides about 200 or so of those lights for us every single year. And we really do try to make sure they have them. It's a little more important, I think, on the grade school age kids. So our kids that are 5 years old and up, those younger kids who are on those 16-inch bikes who aren't riding to school, they probably don't need them as much, but they love them. They have so much fun turning those bike lights on, and then they go dead, and you got to get new batteries in them. So it is important to make sure that you've got ones that you can replace batteries in relatively easily. Those frog lights are a joke. They're better than nothing, but like once they go dead, it's kind of the end of the light. I shouldn't say they're a joke. That's a bad thing to say. They're better than nothing. Yeah.
So has BBC interacted with educational opportunities for adults that have never ridden bikes but are coming to you to start their journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do that a little bit less often, but we still have those opportunities available. We try to make sure that anybody who's experiencing some transportation barriers that we work with to make that possible. Right now, we're partnering with this I Can Shine. Have you guys heard of this? So it's a program specifically for kids and young adults with Down syndrome, and they have some special bikes where they can learn to ride. Oftentimes, people are given some parameters that your kid will never be able to ride a bike, your kid will never be able to drive a car, but bicycle is a big one. And so if you can overcome that barrier and say, okay, we actually can get them so that they can ride a bike, you start wondering, what else can I overcome? A lot of the adult programs that we have are a little more focused around the refugee community, and specifically women from the refugee community, because a lot of them, one, haven't ridden bicycles, and where they're from, it may not have been socially acceptable to ride bicycles. And a lot of them are in families where if they do have a car, they only have one of them. And so if the male in the family is using the car, that leaves them without a lot of transportation. And so what we've been doing with them is we've actually been working on exercise bikes. So we start with exercise bikes. We teach people how to pin up their skirts or dresses. We try to use more women in the program than men, but we get them comfortable with actually dressing and getting themselves prepared to actually hop on that bike and start riding, getting used to that movement. And then similar that you would for kids, we start by taking the pedals off. And we have them doing balance bike stuffs in the park when there's a slight decline on the hill, so they can get used to just lifting their feet up and then putting their feet down when they need to. And if they fall, they're on grass, so it's not so bad. And then we gradually put those pedals back on there. There's a company called Strider, you're probably familiar with their bikes. They have an amazing video on how to teach kids how to ride bicycles, from moving them from striders, getting them really comfortable with balance, and then moving them on to pedals. And they sort of have a point of view where you need to teach people how to balance first and not push people onto pedals too fast, because there's kids who can do wheelies on these balance bikes and go over curbs and do all these things, and they've got that part absolutely nailed. So then once you put the pedals on there, like all they have to do is start moving, whereas a lot of people, the kids don't have the balance bikes down quite yet, and they try to move them to pedal bikes a little too early. So we do those. We typically do those as like an event. So we do them like less regularly, but more like once a year. We'll have like a special event where we're working with all of our different refugee organizations. And then we have people who come into the shop who want to buy a bicycle and they don't know how to ride them. And we simply go out back and we start that process and we show them a few tips. Do you guys have any up there? Adult riding classes?
No, not at all.
Because you've got a little co-op up there, right?
We do.
Yeah.
Small co-op.
Mhm.
I don't know that they're doing any educational.
Sure. Yeah, usually it seems like kids get a lot of the focus and the adults not as much. It really is something that can create some huge opportunities for adults in the community, so I think that's important to not overlook. Yeah.
We're looking at doing some sort of like a mobile classroom, like classroom, where we could go to their outlying areas in our Moscow and taking out to schools, teaching kids how to ride bike. A lot of fourth graders don't know how to ride bike, even in Moscow, climbing to our surprise, but also getting them to learn how to use the bike and also maintaining their bikes.
Mm.
And so what we're wanting to do is have a trailer that's covered with a bike fleet in it and to teach. And then
Pulled behind a car?
And then,
Yeah.
behind a car. And so I'm curious to know, do you guys do that? Do you have any recommendations on what sort of trailer would be good for that? Or
So there's some bike co-ops that only exist mobily. They may have a warehouse somewhere, but they're not open to the public, and they simply go around and they do exactly what you're talking about. And there's actually some for-profit bicycle repair places that have something similar around. You can do it in anything. You can do it in a horse trailer, but whatever you have available. In the bike co-op community, there's this thing called, it's called bikecollectivethinktank.com. And you can type in a question, and it will go out into the entire group. If you send me an email later today, I can hook you up with them, and then ask a question, and everybody will send you what they're doing or what their ideas are. I know that there's a couple in California. I know there's a couple in Florida who do that exact model. So the one that we have that we do mobile bike repair on, it's like a big, huge toolbox. About as big as this section of the counter, and we pull it behind an electric bicycle, so an e-bike that we pull around, and we show up, and we can usually fit about 4 bikes on top. We can fit about 3 bicycle repair stands and about 3 toolboxes and repair supplies on the inside. So we kind of roll up on this pedal-powered repair stand, like the bookmobile of sorts, and these kids at this point, like, they know it, so they see it coming. It's nice to actually have to be able to roll up with a trailer, whether it's pedal powered or behind a car, and have people actually see it and know what it is, and loud enough that it generates some sort of attention and stuff like that. Yeah, with bike parts and stuff like that on the side of it, and make it really fun. I think that that's such a great way to do it, especially if you don't have access to a lot of storage and things like that. Because again, there is sort of an issue when you tell people that they need to come to you in order to get their bicycles fixed, when that may be a big barrier. We tend to not run into it as much for when we're donating a kid's bike. That's a big enough event that usually a family can make it, put it in their schedule to come down there and get it. But if it's about bike repair, then that's a lot tougher. And if you can show up and let the kids be a little independent from their parents, and let them kind of come down on their own, or have their parents sign off on it, or hook up with a nonprofit or a community center where you do it there. There's some huge advantages to doing it that way, and we're finding a bigger need for that more and more. And right now we actually can't get out to Meridian with our pedal-powered one, so it would be really nice to have a trailer to get out there with. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, so a lot of the kids who are in our Earn a Bike program who've earned bicycles from us, they can continue to earn money for their bicycles. So they can continue to come into the shop and make $20 an hour, which is pretty sweet. But they have to use it on stuff for their bikes. They can buy t-shirts with it, and stuff like that as well. These kids typically become the mentors and the teachers for our other kids who are going to learn. And so they get paid to come out and help us do mobile bike repair. And so they may be out there for an hour, they get $20, and they're the ones who are actually helping us teach some of the other kids. About 13 years old and up is kind of where we've got a 10-year-old at the shop, a Shiloh, who's gotten 4 bicycles from us at this point, and he keeps moving and getting older. He nails it. He can teach anybody. He can teach you how to fix your flat tire if you didn't know how to already, or he can teach you how to true a wheel. And so he's kind of an exception, but it seems like at about 12 or 13, these kids can really start working with other kids about their same age and getting in there and messing around. And sometimes it's hard to get them to share the tools and to do as much hands-off teaching. But even when they don't do a lot of hands-off teaching, it's still a really kind of eye-opening process for the kid who's there to say, oh, this kid can fix their bike, I can fix my bicycle too. And then we just have to walk around and remind them, hey, who's fixing the bicycle over here? Have you gotten a chance to touch the wrench yet? And so they'll share them a little bit more. But using kids to help other kids fix bikes is an awesome way to do it. And then you hire, if you do have the ability to hire or have volunteers, you have these volunteers who are essentially big kids themselves, whether they're 20 years old or 60 years old. There's lots of big kids in our community who are able to work with littler kids. Yep. Village Bicycle Project? I just got off the phone with them before I came down here. We used to work with them a lot. So that's an organization that actually sends bicycles to Africa, mostly Sierra Leone and Ghana. And we were sending them about 300 bicycles a year, bicycles that were, we don't fix any bikes at the shop that take us longer than 2 hours to fix. We're lucky that we get enough donated in that we can make that choice. And so we've got a lot of bikes that would either be taken apart or go to the landfill because they're taking a little too long. You turn their handlebars, you take the pedals off, you get them nice and flat, and once you get about 300 of them or so, they can put them in a shipping container and send them overseas. So their executive director retired, Dave, and so they've had a little bit of a hard time getting it going again, but they've got some other folks now who are helping getting it going, and that was what I was talking to them earlier. I said, we've got 10 bicycles every single week. If somebody can pick them up and take them somewhere else, you can have them. We can make that offer to Village Bicycle Project. We could make that offer to Nampa, to Emmett, like anybody who needs these bikes, like they're sitting there waiting, they just need to be fixed up. And we just want to make sure that somebody gets them that it can be really helpful rather than going and recycling them for scrap value. I got back from Haiti in November, and I spent about a month there teaching kids how to repair bicycles and seeing if that was a place we could potentially send bikes. The best bike that I worked on in Haiti was by far worse than the worst bike that we send to the scrapyard here in Boise. So we've got some bikes that really could be creating a lot of change in some different communities, and we've got enough of them that we could be sending them somewhere else. That's a good question. There was one more over here, I thought. No? Well, I think we just about hit our time limit. One more?
Like that. So do you get quite a bit of volume or frequency of people that do come in and buy, I guess the segment more towards adults, right?
Mm.
Kind of specialty shop, quality buy.
Sure. So
What kind of volume drives, because you gotta eat, right?
yeah, we have 16 employees at the bike project at this point, and 6 of them are full-time. The other ones are part-time mechanics. We call them educators because they're teaching people how to fix bikes. So we cannot keep bicycles on the shelf. So as fast as we fix an adult bicycle, the average price around $200, and we sold one the other day for $1,500. The old triathlon, or not even a 1-year-old triathlon bike by somebody who upgrades their triathlon bike every single year. And that will that funds 15 adult bikes for us to give to refugees, or not give, for refugees to earn in the shop. And so, yes, we cannot fix bicycles fast enough. Every single bike that we fix sells. And so we're talking about 20 bicycles a week. All throughout the year, we cannot keep our shelves full. And we donate tons of bicycles to kids. We also sell used kids' bikes for between 10 to about $50 or so, depending on the size and what brand they are. And those fly right out the door as well, because there's a lot of people in our community who maybe don't quite qualify for our kids' bike giveaway programs, but they also either may not be able to afford or don't want to buy a brand new bike. And so we make sure that we always have both adult bikes and kids' bikes available for sale. And that's a really important part of our mission, is making quality, affordable bicycles available to the community. So it's really awesome for a bicycle co-op be able to fund their mission with their mission. Our goal is to try to get our earned income, used bikes, parts and bike sales up to about 75%. It's about 65% right now. So the rest of it comes through donations, grants, those memberships that we talked about earlier, people who pay $60 a year to come in and use the shop as much as they want. And some people, they buy memberships just to support us and our programs. It's sort of their way of donating. But having that earned income really allows a lot of flexibility in the budget and makes it easier to plan things. If you're always relying on grants, it's pretty terrifying to think that if this grant goes away, then this program goes away, this employee goes away, all of these other things. So we try really hard to make sure that if we're getting a grant, we're getting a grant that can start a program that can potentially fund itself. So getting a grant that allows us to work with the women's prison program and buys all those tools so that they can fix 15 bicycles a week. We can sell half of those, donate the other half, and then provide that funding to go back into the program. So we're really big on trying to make earned income a thing, because it makes it a lot easier for us to be able to plan for the future and to rely on that sort of funding to come in. And we know that, like, it takes, if a mechanic fixes 1 bike a day, that pays for themselves. So that pays for that employee. If they fix 2 bikes a day, it pays for themselves and the cost of running the shop. If they can fix 3 bicycles a day, that pays for themselves, the shop, and then the rest of that funding can go into our programs. So it's pretty simple arithmetic a lot of times for these bicycles that are around $100 to $200, that if you can fix 2 to 3 bicycles a day, you can not only sustain an employee and get bicycles out to the community that you need, but you can also find funding for those programs. And if you've got bicycles coming in like it's nobody's business, like we do, we're getting 100 bikes donated a week. Then we can't fix them fast enough, and we need projects to start in Nampa, in Emmett, in these other places so that we can direct bicycles to them, and then they can figure out what to do with them once they have them. It's simply just more than we can possibly handle.
How are you getting that from bikes?
Yeah. So many people have them. So what we do is we don't advertise. We don't get the word out whatsoever. And I think we've established ourselves in this particular community enough that people know when they've got a bike sitting around in the garage and they have to drop it off somewhere, they bring it to us. They can write it off on their taxes. It's a little bit different this year because the tax code got all screwed up. We'll get into that. But that hasn't really affected the amount of bicycles coming into us. When we first started and we didn't have our own 501c3 nonprofit status, we started out as a program underneath another nonprofit, the Idaho Federation of Families for Children's Mental Health. Doesn't have anything to do with bicycles whatsoever, but we got bicycles to kids in their program, and we were able to use their own 501c3 while we were applying for our own particular 501c3. Yes, yeah, absolutely. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be like another bicycle organization, or it could be an advocacy organization that's out there already. If you made a strong enough pitch to BBP, I would love for you to come and pitch it to our board of directors and say, hey, we would like to start our own bike program. Could we start out as you as our fiscal sponsor so that we could begin collecting these bike donations? Once you start donating bicycles to kids, the news shows up and they shoot all sorts of great pictures. It's the best thing that could possibly be on TV. Everybody loves it, and all of a sudden the word gets out and they say, oh, I should donate a bicycle to that organization. So we're so lucky to be doing things that are tangible. The Idaho Federation of Families for Children's Mental Health, it's almost impossible for them to get the news to any of their events because mental health isn't a sexy subject, and it's very hard for people to see what's on there. And I feel really bad sometimes for these organizations that don't do things that are quite as tangible, because it makes it really easy for us to get the word out. It's really tangible, it's really identifiable, and if people see you start doing it on the news or in the newspaper or things like that, people come out of the woodwork, for sure.
How far out are you thinking is reasonable to go when people want to reach out to you to try to start something?
I mean, when Palouse Bike Co-op, is that the one? Yeah, so we sent them all of our 501c3 information. We sent them all of our articles of incorporation. We sent them all of our bylaws. We basically gave them all the stuff that we had to kind of learn from the beginning and said, hey, go start your own thing. And that's really easy to do. So as far as like a first step goes, like we'll give everybody our business plan. We'll give you everything that we've got. If you want to come down and pick up bikes, McCall probably picks up 100 bikes from us a year. For a while, Pocatello was picking up bicycles from us and taking them down there. We've helped a bicycle co-op get started in Nebraska that saw us on the news. We just helped the same prison program that we've got with Shifting Gears get started in North Dakota. I mean, all of these things that we have are, I mean, they're really open source. We can share like our plans on how to do them. And then as far as a pitch goes, as far as operating as a program underneath us, I mean, we would entertain anybody who wanted to make that ask. And if they could make a strong enough case, we would be really excited about doing that. We're trying really hard to get some folks in Nampa doing something similar right now, to the point where we're giving them about 40 fixed 16-inch bicycles about every 2 months and saying, these bikes are fixed, they're ready to go. Figure out who needs them in your community. Make sure that they go through a safety class. We'll even give you the helmets. Take them, they're yours. And the second that they start giving those bikes away, they'll stop taking them from BBP because their whole community is going to be donating bicycles to them. So it happens, and it happens. Storage becomes an immediate problem the second that people catch wind of what you're doing. Yeah.
I was just gonna make a point too, because a lot of this conference focuses on rural communities, which makes up a lot of what I know.
Sure.
But like in our community, I mean, when I grew up
Yeah.
So if you kind of put all your eggs in one basket in an actual retail bike shop, it's probably not gonna be as effective as what you're.
Sure. I mean, there's hardly any overhead. You're not paying for $100,000 a year for bicycles to equip your shop with. You're simply fixing the stuff up as it comes in. There are new tubes that you have to buy and some things along those lines. Sometimes you can find sponsorships for them. But these types of things, they work great in rural communities. And Cascade and McCall are really good examples because a lot of times some of the lower income families still live relatively close to the city or to the town center. And getting around on a bicycle can really open up a lot of doors for folks. And chances are, again, even in these rural communities, people still have a couple of bicycles sitting around. They probably have a couple of really old ones leaning against the tractor. I can say that because I grew up in Cascade and Boise. But like, there's bicycles everywhere. You look around, and they are all over the place. Some of them are just waiting to get fixed up. And if they can't be fixed up, I guarantee you that they've got a part on them that can be used to fix another bicycle. And so eventually you start turning this kind of bicycle graveyard into your inventory that you can start using to fix all of these other bikes. So every bike has at least one part on it. Yeah, we got a bike one time that was leaning against a tree for so long that the tree grew around it, and they had to cut it down with the chainsaw, and the tree's about that big, and the frame's in the middle of it. It's hanging on our wall at the shop. You'll see it in a little bit if you make the trip.
Oh, Walmart bikes. What happens to Walmart bikes? Do you actually repair them, use their parts still? Or do they all, I've heard that they're just sort of, like you get a flat tire and it costs more to repair it than to go to the bikes and stuff.
Yeah, so I'm really careful not to trash on department store bicycles too much because that may be somebody's pride and joy, and they may be riding around on that thing, and any bike is better than no bike whatsoever. That said, they're kind of garbage. The problem with them isn't necessarily the bicycle itself. It's usually the quality control that goes into it. So most of the bicycles that we donate probably were purchased from a department store, and they aren't that much different. But when they were sold, the fork was on backwards. There was no grease in the bearings. All of these, the cones weren't adjusted. So the bicycles that we donate, although they're used, and some of them are department store bikes, by the time they go out, they are in better than new condition because we've gone through every single bearing and we've tuned up every single thing on there, and they're pretty good. Now, what doesn't really work very well is most of your stuff from your department stores that are suspension bikes. The suspension systems on them, they're just terrible. And it really does the people a disadvantage who are riding around on them because, one, they're not meant for the mountains, but they look like mountain bikes, and soon they'll break down and they're not serviceable. Nicer bikes that cost thousands of dollars, their shocks are serviceable, not the department store ones. So if it doesn't have a shock on it, most of the time you can turn that into a pretty decent bike that's going to get somebody to where they need to go. There was a guy at Jump. I did a presentation there last night, and he came up to me, and he started out doing work trade at the Boise Bicycle Project on the crappiest full suspension Walmart bike that I'd ever seen. And he would come in and he would be irritated and he'd be upset, and he was really difficult to work with. And he would still come in and we would get his bicycle rolling down the road. Well, after he'd been coming in for about 2 months or so, he was able to get a job washing dishes at Chili's. He purchased the bicycle from us for $200, and he got rid of that other one. We ended up parting it out. And now he's working at Jump, and he's riding around on a fat bike. It's about an $800 bike. And when he rides, he like cruises at a nice, slow and steady pace, and it's kind of his way of unwinding at both the beginning and the end of the day. And so it's really transformed not only his opportunities in the community, but his behavior. So he has that sort of outlet. But for a time there, that full suspension Walmart bike was the only thing that he had. And when he came into the shop, if we would have treated that bike like garbage and not that tool that was going to connect him to the community, maybe he wouldn't have stuck around. And so I think it's important that you treat people and their bicycles with value, because they do have some sort of value that's in them. And it may be the creakiest, slowest moving, terrible bicycle ever, but if that's all they have at the time and that's what they need to do to connect them to the next step, then you do whatever you can to make it so that bicycle can go and stop Whether it shifts gears, who gives a crap? But that bicycle needs to be able to stop when you hit the brakes, and it needs to be able to hold air, and it needs to be able to pedal. And if you can at least get it there, it can still get people to where they need to go. So I'm really glad that you brought up that point, because that's something that we struggle with at the shop, is that we have these biases about these bicycles, but we don't know what that person's situation is, and it may be all that they have. I think we're hitting up on time, yeah? So maybe one more question if there's a last one, and then I'm happy to answer more. Plus, we're also going to the shop as well, if you're making that ride, and we can talk a little more there. Yeah.
I'm just curious if you know of any co-op that focuses more on the mountain biking aspects and getting people out on the trails.
Sure.
Because that's a very expensive sport, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who want to get out, especially kids, but it's just too expensive.
Yeah, so the Pay at River bicycle movement, the one that I was talking about in McCall, they donate a lot of really basic bikes to really younger kids, but they get a lot of our smaller 24-inch and 26-inch mountain bikes, and they take them out and they teach them how to mountain bike. And for some of the kids who even live in these beautiful communities who have trails right outside their back door, it doesn't mean that they actually are going out there and exploring them or even knowing that they can. And so giving kids access to that public space and this place where they can go and be free and recreate, I think is really important. I think there's probably some more specific ones that are out there, but there's groups like Boise has a group called BIRDS, the Boise Young Rider Development Squad. And they've got scholarship programs that make sure kids with lower income can have access to a bicycle, and then actually there are group rides that go out. We also have SWIMA, the Southwest Idaho Mountain Biking Association here. Typically there's somewhere like that around. What we try to do at the Bike Project, since that's not really our area of expertise, is we'll focus on trying to get the kids the bicycles and then getting them involved with those other organizations so they can do their kind of area of expertise. Every once in a while we do some kids trail rides and stuff like that, and we have a fun time doing it. But there may be some in like Boulder or Fort Collins too that maybe have some stuff that's a little more specific there. Yeah, Parks and Rec has those summer camps. Yeah, there's almost always some Parks and Rec summer camps out there, and there's almost always a scholarship program for Parks and Recs to get in there. That's a really good point. I've got my business card, some information about BBP, our annual report, and the most adorable kids bike-a-thon poster that you've ever seen. We're doing this event for the month of May where kids get points for riding their bicycles every single day. Extra points for wearing their helmets, extra points for going to some different areas around town. It's kind of just a fun way to get kids riding. And so, one, if you've got kids, it's not too late to have them start joining in some of those activities. Two, it's a really fun poster. So if you want any of those things, take them. And I think maybe at 4 o'clock, let's meet out in front. That's in about 10 minutes. Let's meet out in front of the Capitol Building by the bikes right over here. And we'll take a quick spin down to the Boise Bicycle Project. And then I think after that, your next stop is that George's area or wherever it is that you want to go. And I can make sure that we get you there safe and sound. Well, thank you so much. Pictures, you can just drop those off by the chair in the back. We'll pick those up. Thank you.